Welcome everyone to the podcast. Today we're diving into how China and Russia are actively supporting formerly colonized global South countries, particularly in defending their sovereignty against U.S. interventionism, as described by Nicaragua's perspective.
That's intriguing. So, we're looking at a real narrative of countering historical Western, especially US meddling, right?
Exactly. Yep. It's really about Nicaragua's experience with past U.S. invasions and military occupations. Daniel Ortega, Nicaragua's president, explains that the support from China and Russia isn't just about economic aid, but a broader political backing.
So, while the US has a long history of interventions in Latin America and beyond, China and Russia are positioning themselves as allies for making a sovereign stand.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Historically, Nicaragua endured numerous interventions, CIA backed Contras, coup attempts, and the infamous US imperialism, and now it's seen as part of a larger struggle against Western imperialism.
and what's really striking is how that historical narrative is framed as part of a global fight for reclaiming sovereignty, isn't it?
Absolutely. The narrative goes further than Latin America. It ties in with other historical struggles in Africa and Asia, where former colonies have had similar encounters with Western intervention.
So it sounds like there's an overarching context of the global South standing up as a majority against neo-imperial practices.
Yes, indeed. It's like the argument is that the global South isn't just a peripheral region, but a majority that demands respect for its independence and its sovereignty. This perspective challenges the traditional dominance of US power.
That's a powerful claim. I mean, when you bring up the historical pushback against US interventions, you're also talking about moments like the Sandinista Revolution, which was really a pivotal moment for Nicaragua.
Right, the Sandinista Revolution is central to this story. It's used as an example of how indigenous forces can rise against long established imperialist practices. It also highlights the importance of external allies like China and Russia, who see America's interventionism as a threat to global balance.
I get that. But, some might argue that aligning with China and Russia isn't without its own risks. They could have their own geopolitical ambitions that might compromise the global South's interests. Isn't that a valid concern?
Yeah, that's a fair critique. There's definitely a debate on whether these alliances might simply replace one hegemon with another. However, proponents like Ortega see it as a necessary counterbalance, a way to push back against decades of US led aggression.
So, while the critics worry about hidden agendas, the supporters argue that without any strong counterweights, history might keep repeating itself with similar patterns of interference.
Exactly. The report emphasizes that these actions aren't isolated. They're part of a cycle starting with historical colonialism, moving through Cold War dynamics, and now extending into modern global politics.
It's remarkable how this conversation spans from events like the CIA-backed Contras to modern infrastructure projects funded by China, like the building of roads and facilities that support local economies.
Yeah, and that infrastructure isn't just for economic growth. It also symbolizes the reassertion of sovereignty. It's like saying, we don't need your military interference when we can build our own path.
Yeah, that's a compelling metaphor. And it must really resonate for countries that have endured so much external pressure and interference.
Absolutely. It's a powerful narrative that interweaves local struggles with broader geopolitical contestations. For instance, the historical legacies of European colonialism are brought into the conversation to show that Western domination isn't as justified as it once was seen.
And it also ties into how Western powers once exploited these regions for their own gain. Imagine decades of this exploitation now being met with solidarity from other nations that offer not just criticism, but actual tangible support.
That's right. And it's interesting because the video even references how events like the Haitian Revolution and the Algerian Revolution serve as inspirations, symbols of resistance that keep the flame of self-determination alive.
I love that connection. It's like history is a series of chapters, and each revolution feeds into the next, building a case for why external influences shouldn't dictate sovereignty.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's this whole aspect of global institutions. The discussion goes into how organizations like the UN are dominated by Western powers, a point that further fuels the desire for a new global order, or at least a reshaping of international rules.
Right. And that's where figures like Ortega are so vocal. They argue that the current international system is, well, stacked against the sovereignty of nations in the global south.
Absolutely. It's almost like the call for a new UN or a reformed global governance structure is a byproduct of centuries of bias and intervention. And countries are looking for an order that better represents their interests, their histories, and their struggles.
It sounds like there's a real push here for a multipolar world where no single power can unilaterally dictate terms.
Precisely. The focus is on multipolarity as a way to balance things out, ensuring that nations, whether in Latin America, Africa, or Asia, have a real say in global affairs.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting how infrastructure projects become a metaphor for this balance? It's like instead of walls, you build bridges. That's a pretty optimistic view of these geopolitical shifts.
Exactly, and it's not just about physical infrastructure, but also about economic and political infrastructure that supports sovereignty. It's a narrative of reclaiming power through cooperation with like minded states, not isolation.
And the narrative also seems to suggest that US interventions have a long history, from the Somoza dictatorship to the much criticized Contra War, adding more weight to the idea that change is long overdue.
Right. It really drives home the point that historical patterns of oppression demand new alliances and new strategies to protect national integrity. The voice in the video argues that without these alliances, the cycle of domination might never end.
But while the narrative is strong, I wonder if there might be another layer to consider. What about internal challenges within these countries that might be exacerbated by reliance on external support?
That's a great point. Sure, external support is vital, but there's always the threat of dependency. Yet, the message here is that given the history of US interventionism, aligning with powers like China and Russia offers a counterweight, even if it's not a flawless solution.
And it almost seems like a pragmatic choice rather than an ideological one. Countries may be weighing the pros and cons. Pick the lesser of two evils, so to speak.
Exactly. There's this sense of urgency to counteract the influences of a long oppressive legacy. And while no system is perfect, for many countries, the support from China and Russia represents a real alternative to decades of unilateral US policies.
And it's fascinating how the video ties this all together with historical touchpoints. The mention of European colonialism, the ICJ case against the US, and even revolutionary figures like Sandino.
Yes, it paints a multifaceted picture where history, politics, and even cultural memory converge. It's that collective memory of resistance that fuels these alliances today.
Yeah, I really appreciate how it challenges the listener to rethink what nationhood and sovereignty mean in a modern global context. It's not just about economics or hard power, but, about identity and justice.
Exactly. And that's what makes this discussion so relevant today. It pushes us to question the enduring legacy of US interventionism and consider alternative alliances that might offer a more balanced global future.
Agreed. It's a complex yet essential debate that we need to keep an eye on as the world shifts towards a more multipolar order.